Right, so I'm at the stage now where I'm laying out all the wiring. So the original bits of Fiesta harness are coming out this side as they were before. I've obviously pulled out all of the ignition system wiring, put it back in by the fuse box. The Puma main wiring is coming out here, some of it up to this way, a couple plugs out to the lambda sensors, and a lot more of it over this way where we've got the multi-plug down there that joins all of this stuff, and the multi-plug down there that's the multi-plug there, and then there's another plug for the speed sensor. Got your coil plugged in there. So I've just laid it out to basically get it started. Still got to make up a cable from the starter. This is the original Fiesta trigger wire, and over here is a battery terminal going through the bulkhead where the cable will be running from the back of that bulkhead fitting into the boot, where I've now got the Puma battery box bolted down to the floor. So the earth for that's just going to go to one of the seatbelt mounts, clean that up, make sure it's got a good connection, and then there'll be this 35mm, I think they call it 2 gauge in American, red wire. It's just a flexible like welding wire cable from Amazon that will run from the positive there all the way to that terminal under the dash here where all the wiring goes up. Obviously the ECU is going in this corner. So out of all the ECU wiring and the engine stuff, I've got everything labelled here like in the previous video where I stripped all this loom pack. So all of these wires have to connect up to switched lives, permanent lives, and bits for the dash, and relays for fans and stuff like that. So I'm using all the fan system from the Puma where it's switched through the earth from the ECU. So when the ECU detects the certain temperature from the ECU coolant temperature, it switches on the earth to trigger the relay to turn on the fans. For the Fiesta temperature gauge under there, like I explained in the other video, the original one is connected through the sensor down there. I'm going to try and do a little snippet of each of these wires I'm connecting up and what I'm connecting them to, and other than them bits, there'll be 2 additional relays mounted on the fuse box over there, one for the fuel pump and one for the fan. Clutch switch, one black, one brown. Brown one goes over to the ECU, black one to the earth up on the steering column. Brake switch, no connection to the ECU, so use the original Mk3 Fiesta one. Just the battery connections now. So we've got the Puma battery box riveted down to the boot floor. The earth cable is going down there and bolted under one of the seat brackets straight onto the body, and we've got the main power cable, 35 square millimeter cable, going in there behind the rear door card in there, and then running down this part here and along the top of this inside the kick panel, and then up here with positive cables, the red and blues, onto a bulkhead fitting, and that bulkhead fitting obviously goes then inside the engine bay, along here, and over to the starter motor, and then links from the starter motor up to the alternator. Just still got to put that cable between the alternator and the starter motor on. So that's what I've done for the battery cables. And then I've got an earth from the loom. That earth actually goes to the fan and a couple of other bits like the lights, and I've just bolted that through and got this earth cable running over onto the gearbox over there for an earth for the starter and engine and everything. On the Puma there's actually another earth that goes up to the bulkhead here, so it'll be well earthed, and the engine is turning over now, so pretty good. So oil pressure light from the Fiesta dash, brown and green wire, and from the Puma side, black wire. The alternator light on the dash, blue one from the Fiesta dash, and red and white from the Puma. So we've got a black and blue and a white and black. One is the low speed fan earth trigger, the other one is high speed. I think one of them is to do with air conditioning, one is on the coolant of the engine. But what I've done, just to err on the safe side caution, is put two of them together into a white and black, and they're going to connect onto the earth of the relay for the fan switch. So that one I've actually brought an additional switched live from a spare fuse hole in the fuse box to the relay. So there's switched lives going in there, the output to the fan, and the earth triggered from the ECU will go onto the earth of the relay. What I'm actually going to do as well is run another earth through a switch to that relay, so I can override the fan if doing track racing or anything. So to explain these two relays, they're additional. I know there's spaces in the fuse box, but to get the specific ones that fit in there and the terminals is kind of hard to get. So I put external ones here on the side of the fuse box, and so the fan one, the feed to it power wise is a switched live. The fuel pump I've tapped off of the permanent live buzz bar that's in the fuse box, and it has, the fuel pump is switched by the earth from the ECU, this one, and the fan, it's switched by the earth feeds from the ECU, and I've also wired in a little switched earth here from the earth post there, so that I can do an override of the fan as well. Now that'll only work when the key is on, but if you're out on track or something, you just put it on permanent and let it blow. Now on the Fiesta fuse box there's some spare spaces, and two of them that were on mine because it was carbureted was number 1 for injection and number 19 for injection. So what I've done is fed switched lives from inside the fuse box here to those locations, 19 and 1, and used some of the terminals out of the Puma's fuse box to feed into there. So cut back the cables, pulled the pins out of the Puma fuse box, and then shoved them into the spare holes of the Fiesta fuse box. So then they'll provide the switched lives fused over to the ECU and the sensors and all that kind of stuff. Just to add another bit onto the fuel pump relay, so the wire that goes to the fuel pump, when this relay is activated, there is the obviously the power to the fuel pump, but there's also, which is a purple and red wire, but there's also a purple and blue wire that goes to pin 40, I think, of the ECU, which gives the ECU a readout of voltage to the fuel pump. Got a permanent live to the ECU, orange and yellow, and that's fed to a fused permanent live in the loom here. Right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 switched live feeds here. One of them is just to the ECU switched live. There's the switched live feed to the lambda sensors. There's the switched live feed to the sensors, the crank sensor or air temperature sensor, etc., and one to the coil. So I have these wires coming from the fuse box from fuse 1 and 2 wires from fuse position 20, which I've added in, and they're switched lives. I'm going to split them up between these wires, connect them together. That'll be all the switch lives. Almost forgot, there's a switch live for the key transceiver as well, so I brought that over. Going to feed that in with these as well. We've got some of the interior in now. So ECU is here, kind of squished into this little cabinet and mounted up the top to the inner panel, and then just got the OBD port screwed up to the dash here, and you'll see there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cables in there. 4 of them go back to the ECU, and then the one in pin 16 is a permanent live, and tested that and it works, connects, and with Torque Pro, the app on my phone, I can get rev gauge and temperatures. Fuel gauge, so for the fuel gauge, digital in Puma, you have a red and white and a black, but for the Fiesta fuel gauge, all you have to do is connect the brown and black that goes to the gauge of the Fiesta to the red and white of the Puma tank. Getting places now. Even got the phone mount in, and on with the power. Fuel gauge, temperature gauge, oil light, all the bits, and got OBD port down here, ECU in there, and tested the Torque Pro app while connected through an OBD connector on Bluetooth on my phone, and can read all of the sensors from the ECU and everything. So even though the clocks haven't got a rev gauge, I'll be able to do a digital one on the screen of my phone and some other bits and bobs. Right, all the wires all connected up now. Time for the first start. Let's try it, see what happens. Try again. Sweet, isn't it? I've been working on the wiring in the engine bay, just tidying it all up and getting some of the looming protective stuff over all the wires. Now that the engine's running, at the moment the rocker cover is loose because it was leaking. Need to get another gasket, but yeah, just got the wires coming from here, going that way, Just the wires down here are going to the starter, the fan, the MAF, and earthed down here on just an earthing point. Then we've got all of the original Fiesta lights, wiring and horn and stuff like that coming along here. Got a separate one at the bottom for the sensors, and got another one then coming along here in here with the driver side lights and going down to the multi-plug that comes into this side of the engine. So pretty tidy, all kind of clipped on with P-clips and clipped along the back and clipped down here.